I think in school and maybe in previous generations, there was kind of this idea that uh, things need to be segmented. I know, especially before New Amsterdam Records, right? There was this mentality of serious music versus not serious music that was pretty hardcore. And then I think with albums like Penelope or with William Bertel's experiments and works, I think we started getting to a point where it's like, oh, you can really merge the two and everything can be considered serious. Everything can be a worthwhile source point for inspiration. I just remember hearing these artists while I was down in Texas, where I'm from, and finding this music in high school and early college, being like, wow, they sound so much like themselves. And finding Angelica's music and being like, she sounds so much like herself and no one else sounds like this. And it's so refreshing and exciting to hear a person who just, I don't know, creates with a way of like, this is what I want to say, this is how I want to say it, and this is how I'm going to say it. Kind of uncompromising. And it felt remarkably authentic and enticing. And I was like, oh, there's no way I can do anything other than that. And so I had to do some internal research, and just be like, well, okay, if they sound like themselves, it must be because they know themselves. So then I have to know myself, which is terrifying, but at the same time, really wonderful and really healthy. And so I feel like the process of being a composer or being an artist is an eternal process of coming to terms with yourself and really figuring out, like, who am I? How has that changed from who I was? How could that change from who I'm going to be? And how do I represent that accurately? And the easiest way, honestly, is just pulling from the different sound worlds that I'm of, right? Like, my parents had a small music label when I was a child. My dad was a producer of non-classical music, like lots of dance, hip hop, stuff like that. And so I got all this critical discussion about music, pop music, as a child by accident. And it's like, well, there's no reason to discredit that. Like, I should absolutely be using that. And so I use a lot of electronics in my music. I use sometimes four on the floor drum beats. I like pull from different genres for percussion and bass. And I think it makes a lot of sense. And then when it comes to the personal side, what is the music of a queer community? Like, dance is really important in queerness, and that expression of body and that expression of presence in space. This overlaps with blackness too, of like rhythm, of community, but also of talking about, as I said before, like what's going on in the present tense. Many of the most remarkable Black artists comment on the society that they're in and comment on how they fit within that, how they don't fit within that, and also give a bit of an idea of how it should or could be too. And this ties into like the other half of me that's Mexican, right? With magical realism and these ideas of the world being both what it is and what it isn't at the same time, and how we move through that, and a lot of naturism and really discussing, I don't know, existence with the entities of the land or with rivers and things like this. It kind of all synthesizes in a really beautiful way that makes sense to me because I'm mixed and because I am of all these experiences. And also, in a weird way, like, even with the bipolarness, right? As I said before, there are kind of two modes. I find myself often choosing, like, am I this way or this way at the beginning of a piece? It's like, am I making something that's just beautiful? Am I making something that's aggressive? Am I making something that's extremely political and like pointed? Or am I making something that's so soft? Wow, it's just pretty. And that feels like it comes from having these dual experiences of like manic states versus depressive states, or just like emotional nothingness. I don't know. It all kind of ties in. And I think the most authentic thing that I can do then is to represent what the synthesis of all this is, because the synthesis of all of it is quite literally me. And so if I can represent that in sound, then I'm representing myself in sound, which feels like I'm doing my job as a composer or as a violinist, improvising and fitting myself into these bands and being like, with my very fun instrument dysphoria of like, I don't really want to sound like a violin, but I have all these cool friends at my feet that can, like, with all the pedals, that can make me sound completely different. And that just also feels tied into figuring out, like, how do I represent my experience and my personhood in sound,